Chapter 17, Island of the Blue Dolphins. Storms came early with rain, and between the rains, fierce winds struck the island and filled the air with sand. During this time, I made myself another dress, but most of the days I spent fashioning a spear to catch the devilfish. I had seen this spear made as I had seen my father make bows and arrows, yet I knew little about it, no more than I had about the others. Still, I remembered how it looked and how it was used. From these memories, I made it after many errors and many hours of work sitting on the floor while Rontu slept nearby and the storms beat upon the roof. 4 of the sea elephant's teeth were left, and though I broke all except one, this I worked down to a head with a barbed point. I then made a ring and fastened it to the end of the shaft, and into this ring fitted the head, which was tied to a long string made of braided sinew. When the spear was thrown and struck a devilfish, the head came loose from the shaft. The shaft floated on the water, but the pointed barb was held by the string which was tied to your wrist. This spear was especially good because it could be thrown from a distance. On the first day of spring, I went down to Coral Cove with my new spear. I knew it was spring because that morning at dawn the sky filled with the flocks of darting birds. They were small and black and came only at this time of year. They came out of the south and stayed for 2 suns hunting food in the ravines, and then flew off in one great flight towards the north. Rontu did not go with me to the beach because I had let him out of the fence and he had not returned. The wild dogs had been to the house many times that winter and had paid no heed. He had paid no heed to them, but the night before, after they had come and gone, he had stood at the fence. He stood and whined and walked up and down. It worried me to see him act so strangely. When he refused to eat, I finally let him out. Now I pushed the canoe into the water and drifted towards the reef where the devilfish lived. The water was so clear that it was like the air around me. Far down, the sea ferns moved as though a breeze were blowing there, and among them swam the devilfish, trailing their long arms. It was good to be on the sea after the winter storms, with the new spear in my hand. But all the morning, as I hunted the devilfish, I kept thinking of Rontu. I should have been happy, yet thinking of him, I was not. Would he come back? I wondered. Or had he gone to live with the wild dogs? Would he again be my enemy? If he were my enemy, I knew that I could never kill him, now that he had been my friend. When the sun was high, I hid the canoe in the cave we had found, for once more it was the time the Aleuts might return. And with the 2 small bass I had speared, though not the devilfish, I went up the cliff again. I had planned to make a trail from the cave to my house, but had decided that it could be seen from the ship and by anyone standing on the headland. The climb was steep. As I reached the top, I paused for breath. The morning was quite quiet except for the noise of the little birds flying from the bush to the bush and the cries of the gulls who did not like these strangers. Then I heard the sounds of dogs fighting. The sound came from far off, perhaps from the ravine, and taking my arrows and my bows, I hurried in that direction. I went down the path which led to the spring. There were tracks of the wild dogs around the spring, and among them I saw the large ones of Rontu. The tracks led away through the ravine, which winds to the sea. I heard again the distant sounds of fighting. I went slowly through the ravine because of my bows and arrows. At last I came to the place where it opens into the meadow right at the edge of the low sea cliff. Sometimes in the summers, a long time ago, my people had lived there. They gathered shellfish on the rocks and ate them here, leaving the shells, which after many summers had formed a mound. Over this grass had grown, and a thick-leaved plant called napapan. On this mound, among the grasses and the plants, stood Rontu. He stood facing me with his back to the sea cliff. In front of him, in a half circle, were the wild dogs. At first I thought that the pack had driven him there against the cliff and were getting ready to attack him. But I soon saw that two dogs stood out from the rest of the pack between it, and Rontu and their muzzles were wet with blood. One of these dogs was the leader who had taken Rontu's place when he had come to live with me. The other one, which was spotted, I had never seen. The battle was between Rontu and these two dogs. The rest were there to fall upon whichever was beaten. So great was the noise made by the pack, they had not heard me as I came through the brush, nor did they see me now as I stood at the edge of the meadow. They sat on their haunches and barked with their eyes fixed on the others. But I was sure that Rontu knew I was somewhere near, for he raised his head and smelled the air. The two dogs were trotting back and forth along the foot of the mound, watching Rontu. The fight had probably started at the spring, and they had stalked him to the place where he had chosen to fight. The sea cliff was behind him, and they could not reach him from the direction, so they were trying to think of some other way. It would have been easier if one could have attacked him from the back and the other from the front. Rontu did not move from where he stood on top of the mound. Now and again he lowered his head to lick a wound on his leg, but whenever he did, he always kept his eyes on the two dogs trotting up and down. I could have shot them from they were within reach of my bow and arrow, or driven off the pack, yet I stood in the brush and watched. This was a battle between them and Rontu. If I stopped it, they would surely fight again, perhaps at some other place less favorable to him. Rontu again licked his wound, and this time he did not watch the two dogs moving slowly past the mound. I thought it was a lure, and so it proved to be, for suddenly they ran towards him. They came from opposite sides of the mound, ears back and teeth bared. Rontu did not wait for the attack, but, leaping at the nearer one, turned his shoulder with his head lowered, caught the dog's foreleg. The pack was quiet. In the silence I could hear the sound of bone breaking, and the dog backed away on three legs. The spotted dog had reached the top of the mound. Whirling away from the one he had crippled, Rontu faced him, but not in time to fend off the first heavy rush. Teeth slashed at his throat as he turned his body, struck him instead on the flank, and he went down. At that moment, while he lay there on the grass, with the dog circling warily and the pack moving slowly towards him, without knowing that I did so, I fit an arrow into the bow. A good distance separated Rontu from his attacker. I could end the battle before he was wounded further, or the pack fell upon him. Yet, as before, I did not send the arrow. The spotted dog paused and turned to his tracks, and again leaped, this time from behind. Rontu was still lying in the grass with his paws under him, and I thought he did not see that the other was upon him. But crouching there, he suddenly raised himself and at the same time fastened his teeth into the dog's throat. Together they rolled off the mound, yet Rontu did not let go. The pack sat restless in the grass. In a short time, Rontu rose to his feet and left the spotted dog where it lay. He walked to the top of the mound and lifted his head and gave a long howl. I had never heard this howl before. It was the sound of many things that I did not understand. He trotted past me and up the ravine. When I got to the house, he was there, waiting, as if he had not been away or nothing had happened. In all the time he lived, Rontu never left again, and the wild dogs, which for some reason divided into 2 packs after that, never returned to the headland again. That was chapter 16. And today, I'm going to send you 3 quotes to read. And after you read the 3 quotes, I want you to choose one. And I want you to write your response to it below. To help you get started, think through some of these questions. The first quote was from earlier in the book that said, "I was surprised that I felt this way, for it was only a short time ago that I had stood on the same rock and felt that I could not bear to live here another day." This was right after she had tried to leave the island, and she came back and was happy to be back on the island. The next one says, "More than anything, it was the blue dolphins that took me back home." This was when she was on her way back, and they were leading her back to the island. And the last one is the most recent, and it says, "I did not know how lonely I had been until I had Rontu to talk to." Choose one of those quotes that means the most to you and answer some of these questions. How does the quote relate to the story? How does the quote apply to you? Do you agree or disagree with it? Does the quote remind you of something that has happened in your own life? Why do you like it or dislike the quote? And how does the quote make you feel? Thank you.